Hello comic fans, here's Earl Grey. My reading habits are pretty all over the place in the last couple of weeks, but I read a lot of European comics, so yeah, let's talk about European comics. Some of them pretty escapist, but some of them unfortunately pretty timely, as you will figure out. I arranged them in some kind of countdown fashion, starting with the maybe least interesting book, yet very enjoyable, pretty good comic here, and working my way up to the most interesting stuff at the end of the video. All of them are not available in English as far as I believe. Maybe you can prove me wrong. So, at first we have Roadmaster. This is the first album in a series of stories, each of them centered around one car type, brand of cars. Pretty typical for Europe. Some European comics, you can call them car comics, that the a certain car is actually the main character in the comic. But we have this protagonist here, Brian Bones, who works for a car insurance company, and he has to figure out why a Buick Roadmaster here in the first story, there's a series of accidents always happening to the same brand, same type of car, and you see here this is Ligne Claire at its best. Very modern yet classic use of Ligne Claire, and I really like the style, and it's pretty enjoyable. The way the story is solved in the end, there are some events that rubbed me a bit the wrong way, and there's some genericness to it and some stuff that is new to the story, but yeah, the story is not fantastic. I mean, I could read it and enjoyed it, but I don't know if I will continue with the series. If I continue with this series, I don't know either. The series is called Tramp. It's written by Jean Charles Kraehn, and drawings are by one Patrick Jusseaume. And the drawings are pretty fantastic, especially in the later albums. Very detailed and very on the point, and delivering an action-packed story about a betrayal of ship insurance company. So this is some kind of a theme here throughout these stories. The series Tramp went up to 10th albums, I believe, but the first cycle of stories ended with the 4th album, so I was pretty satisfied with the read. If I can get the other albums for cheap somewhere else, I will totally hunt them down. Next book in line is pretty decadent in terms of the size, because this is even bigger than the European album size. A lot bigger here. It's this Diamant format by Splitter. In France, it's called a bit differently. But yeah, this is called The Living Dead, or The Living Dead Girl. And written by Olivier Vatine and drawn by Alberto Varanda. Here we have them. And this edition here is in black and white. The smaller one, or the European album size one, is with colors, but this comic here, it's easy to see that this has to be reproduced in black and white. It's a sci-fi comic with Lovecraft, not only tinges of Lovecraft in it, beautifully drawn. I mean, this very schematic hatching here is a bit manieristic, I would say, but it's very effectful when you look at these pages here in this huge format here. About a biological experiment in the future, but takes place somewhere east in a lost castle, so it has very much of a horror vibe here. Bernie Wrightson comes to mind at several places, and it's a gruesome yet delightful mix of several tropes, and doesn't aim to be original, but it's just beautiful, a beautiful cocktail of comic tropes that are familiar to the comic fans since the EC comics. So yeah, I got a lot of EC vibes with these stories, with this story here, but a lot of other stuff. And I would say if you're a true comic fan, it's almost impossible not to like the art and the story, even if the story feels a bit generic and the end is maybe not satisfying for everyone. But especially in this huge format, and here this huge format totally makes sense, because you can really see and appreciate all the hatching stuff that is going on right there. And then we come to Simon vom Fluss by Claude Auclair. Simon from the River. This is the first collected edition of 3 that will come out over here. The French one is already out for years now, but I'm very thankful that we get the chance to reread the stuff here again. I mean, the stories came out in softcover albums decades ago, in fact. Here I have a comic scene, some kind of fanzine. I guess the longest running fanzine in Germany, but I don't know. Don't quote me on that. Because they're still doing their thing. This is from April 1981. And here we have him as the title character there. Let's see if I can find... Yeah. Claude Auclair has... Here. That's him here. He had a big ego way back then, and in an interview he says, okay, Möbius, he's pretty okay, but he works right there in his ivory tower, and I aim to do other stuff, more important stuff, and so. But there's a certain rivalry between them, and so you have to take his words with a grain of salt, because obviously they appreciated each other, Möbius or Jean Giraud and Claude Auclair. And yeah, the pretty depressing stuff, I have to say, is that in this zine, they criticize that this story here is too dark, actually. And it's a post-apocalyptic story in which humankind is thrown back to some kind of hippie world, or post-apocalyptic hippie world. So they have to live in a tribal setting, more or less, and but there's still a war going on between people that are left in the cities, close to the power, the centers of the power, and yeah, and a lot of this stuff here, unfortunately, feels totally timely, especially now with this pathetic psychopath of a Russian president, and yeah, I don't know. It's just it's really, yeah, we don't learn. Mankind doesn't learn, and some of the pages here, a lot of it feels okay, a bit wild western hippie stuff, but then bam, the people in this town are brutally murdered and killed. For instance, we have here a flashback in which the importance of petrol and natural resources like gas and so on is addressed as a reason for warfare and so on, and feels incredibly timely. And even if these spaceship slash planes here are very futuristic, the death that they bring is pretty real. The book here is very well made. It's put out by Crosscult, of all the publishers in Germany. I often criticize them, but this time they made everything right, including a huge essay here in case you had doubts of about the importance of this comic here. They take really no prisoners. They go in depth about Claude Auclair himself and his past and what he wanted and the art, and even here some examples of facsimilized art here. This is a drawing he did for this intro for the second album here, The Clan of the Centaurus. I mean, look at this panel here. What a scenery, what a landscape, and what a use of color. I mean, the first story is in black and white. The rest of the story here is for the most part in color. But here the colors are very effectful, flat yet effectful. And so highly recommend to get this book here. And a huge surprise is this book here. I don't know how this Matthias Gnehm escaped me until the Reverend, der Reverend, a German YouTuber, in one of his recent videos mentioned him. And I guess he spoke about this Simon from Fluss as well. But about Matthias Gnehm, I've never heard of before. He's a Swiss cartoonist, and this comic here is fantastic. Really, really fantastic. And yeah, I would say by far the best of the bunch here. And took me by surprise because I couldn't care less actually about managers in high finance, and these two books are about the shenanigans between them in high finance. But look at the art. Has a lot of, especially the way he colors his panels or paints. These are really painted panels, I would say, especially since this book here is from the early 2000s or something. So the use of color, computer colors was not so common, and this really feels like he painted the stuff and then put the speech bubbles on top of that. And it feels really in lots of places like the use of how Lorenzo Mattotti uses his colors there. And it starts as this crime story and ends as really something else, and with a very impactful message right there here. And if you doubt it feels, I could name you a lot of expressionist painters, but for you in the comic world, have to say this is Lorenzo Mattotti's coloring here, or Matthias Gnehm's coloring. I have to really check out more of his books. But believe me or not, when you read this two-parter here, you will say, "Oh, forget the art. This is great, but the story is unbelievable." It's really, I mean, often I don't get the importance of story. It's all story. And in some comic reviews, when I think, okay, it's it's the way something is told. That's interesting, if you know what I mean. And that's for me always the story, because no story is really told for the very first time, and this is true for this story as well, because it's a remix of certain tropes, but in a way that I would say was never done before in comics. Read it to the last page and tell me if I'm wrong. And boy, yeah, I really hope that some publisher in on some other place in the world will translate this here, and most importantly in English. I mean, it's not by accident, I guess, that a Swiss creator uses the high finance and these these managers in the highest ranks of a bank as his villains or anti-heroes or whatever. So, and here we have some kind of essay, so as files for the jurisdiction here in the end. It's very well made. It's really a pleasure. My only point of critique would be to the publisher Edition Moderne. Yeah, they could have published this in one book. To put this in a two hardcovers here feels a bit unnecessary, but yeah, I like slim hardcovers, so why not? And it's great stuff. And so yeah, that was my video for today. Thanks for listening and watching. Goodbye.